Today's number 22 most urgent vulnerability is CVE 2026-70419 in Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery. And even at rank 22, this one earns attention because the impact is command execution on a disaster recovery platform, the kind of system organizations count on when things are already going wrong. This is the Daily Ranked CVE Brief, what to patch first, ranked by real exploitation signal from CVE, First, EPSS, and CVSS. Here, CVE is currently false, so we are not saying CVE has confirmed active exploitation. But the CVSS score is 9.1 critical, and the EPSS percentile is 0.81085, meaning it sits high in the probability ranking compared with the broader vulnerability population. So the question is not, is this the loudest CVE today? The question is, if you run this product, how quickly can you reduce exposure? CVE-2026-70419 affects Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery. The official NVD description says, Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery, versions 20.2 and prior, contain an improper neutralization of special elements used in an operating system command vulnerability. In plain English, that is OS command injection, tracked as CVE-78. This class of bug happens when software builds or invokes operating system commands using input that has not been safely constrained, escaped, validated, or separated from command syntax. The dangerous part is that the application may think it is processing a normal administrative request, while the operating system may interpret part of that request as a command. NVD states that a high-privileged attacker with remote access could potentially exploit the issue, leading to command execution. That high privilege requirement matters, but it does not make this benign. If an attacker already has elevated access, command injection can turn product-level access into operating system-level impact. Verdict: this is critical because a remote, low-complexity path can lead to full confidentiality, integrity, and availability impact after high-privileged access is present. The two CVSS details that matter most are reachability and blast radius. First, the vector is network accessible, which means the vulnerable path is not limited to someone sitting at the machine. Second, the scope is changed, with high impact across confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In CVSS terms, change scope means the vulnerable component can affect resources beyond its own security authority. For defenders, that is the difference between a product bug and a potential control point for broader system damage. The score is tempered by the fact that privileges required are high. This is not described as an unauthenticated drive-by, but in real environments, high-privilege accounts are exactly what administrators use for recovery operations, and exactly what attackers try to steal, reuse, or abuse after initial access. CIAS status is false for this CVE at the time of today's ranking. That is important. CAD is the clearest public signal we use for known exploitation, and this one is not currently in that bucket. But absence from CVE is not the same as low risk. The EPSS percentile is 0.81085, which places it relatively high in exploit likelihood ranking. Combined with a 9.1 critical CVSS score, this becomes the kind of issue that should move into near-term remediation for any organization running the affected product. The real-world concern is also the role of the platform. Disaster recovery systems often touch sensitive operational data and are trusted during outages, incidents, and restoration workflows. If command execution is achieved in that environment, the attacker's potential impact is not just reading data. It can include changing data, disrupting availability, or interfering with systems that are supposed to help the business recover. Conceptually, the attack path starts with a high-privileged user context and remote reachability to the affected Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery environment. We are not walking through exploit steps, payloads, or proof-of-concept behavior. Defensively, what matters is the chain of conditions. The attacker must be able to interact remotely with the vulnerable product, must have high privileges, and must reach a function where data is handled in a way that can influence an operating system command. That makes identity security part of the mitigation story. If administrative credentials are overused, shared, weakly monitored, or accessible from broad networks, the practical risk rises. If privileged access is tightly scoped, logged, and protected, the path becomes harder. Command injection issues are especially uncomfortable because the application boundary and the operating system boundary can blur. A request that looks like product administration may result in actions executed by the underlying host. Your goal is to keep attackers from ever reaching that combination of privilege, network path, and vulnerable code. To check exposure, start with inventory. Identify every Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery deployment, including production, test, standby, and older recovery environments that may not be part of normal patch reporting. NVD states that versions 20.2 and prior are affected. Still, use the Dell advisory as the source for product-specific confirmation, upgrade guidance, and any nuance in supported deployments. Do not rely only on a central asset database if disaster recovery infrastructure is managed separately. Ask 3 practical questions. 1. Do we run Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery anywhere? 2. What exact versions are deployed? 3. Who can remotely administer those systems, and from where? If the product is internet exposed or reachable from broad internal networks, treat that as a higher exposure condition. If access is limited to a controlled administrative network, that is better, but still not a substitute for patching. Also check whether retired or migration-era instances remain powered on. The primary remediation is to apply Dell's security update or mitigation guidance from the official advisory. Because the NVD description names Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery versions 22 and prior, any matching deployment should be prioritized for vendor-directed update planning. Before changes, follow your normal operational safeguards, capture current configuration, confirm recovery procedures, and coordinate with teams that depend on the platform. Then harden around the patch. Restrict remote administrative access to the smallest necessary set of networks. Enforce strong controls for high-privileged accounts, including individual accounts rather than shared use where possible, and review who actually needs access. Remove stale admins. Rotate credentials if there is any suspicion of misuse. Put the product behind appropriate access controls rather than leaving it broadly reachable. And after patching, verify the installed version and document the result. For a disaster recovery product, the fix should be careful but not slow. The risk is significant enough to justify a planned, tracked, near-term change window. For detection and monitoring, think in layers. Start with authentication logs. Look for unusual high-privileged logins, access from atypical source addresses, after-hours administrative sessions, or accounts performing actions outside their normal pattern. Then look at the host level for unexpected process creation associated with the Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery environment. Because the risk is operating system command execution, defenders should watch for service or application processes spawning command interpreters, utilities, scripts, or child processes that are not part of normal operations. Also monitor outbound network activity from recovery hosts. A disaster recovery system may have legitimate communications, but sudden new destinations, unusual protocols, or traffic at strange times should be reviewed. File integrity monitoring can help identify unexpected changes to configuration files, scripts, scheduled tasks, or system locations. The baseline matters. Document what normal maintenance, backup, replication, and recovery activity looks like, then alert on deviations. If you find suspicious activity, preserve logs, isolate carefully, and investigate privileged credential exposure. Bottom line, CVE 2026-70419 is a critical OS command injection vulnerability in Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery. It is today's number 22 on our ranked list, not because CISA has confirmed exploitation, KEV is false, but because the impact is severe, the score is 9.1, and the EPSS percentile is high enough to take seriously. If you run Dell Cloud Disaster Recovery, verify whether you are on an affected version, check Dell's advisory, patch, and reduce the number of people and networks that can administer the system. Also monitor for unusual privileged activity and unexpected command execution behavior around the product. This is the Daily Ranked CVE Brief. What to patch first, ranked by real exploitation signal every day. Subscribe for the next ranked breakdown and find the full ranked report linked in the description.